Hey guys, in today's lecture we'll be discussing the short song On Children, which was written by Khalil Gibran. Now Khalil Gibran was a prophetic poet. He is a Lebanese American poet who brings out the high philosophy of life in his simple and beautiful poetic essays. His On Children is a critique of the usual expectations of parents about their children. This poem offers guide to parents on the essence of parenting. Now, without further ado, let's begin our lecture with a short introduction on Khalil Gibran. Now, who was Khalil Gibran? Khalil Gibran, known in Arabic as Gibran, Khalil Gibran, though it is Gibran, often it is read as Jubran, Gibran. So, Khalil Gibran, also known in Arabic as Gibran Khalil Gibran, was born in January 6, 1883 in Bishari, Lebanon, which was a part of Syria at that time, and Syria was a part of the Ottoman Empire. Now, the year is 1883. Now, he was the youngest son of Khalil Shah Gibran, a tax collector, and his father was imprisoned for embezzlement. Now, what do you mean by embezzlement? When you can do some fraud with the funds, then you will be arrested. When you do some fraud with the money, then you will be arrested and imprisoned. So his father was imprisoned for embezzlement, and his mother was Kamila Gibran, and his mother's father was a clergyman in the Maronite Christian Church. Now, Maronite Christian Church means these were Christians who lived in Syria. So they were practicing Christianity. Khalil Gibran was practicing Christianity. Now, in 1885, Gibran emigrated with his mother and siblings to United States, where they settled in the large Syrian and Lebanese community in Boston in Massachusetts. Now, in America at that time, people used to come and stay. Even in Britain, there are places where Indians and Pakistanis stay in abundance. There's a place called Brick Lane in Britain. Similar to that, in United States too, people used to come and stay because it was basically a colony of Britain in the beginning. And Khalil Gibran and his mother, along with his siblings, came to United States. They emigrated to United States and they settled in a Syrian Lebanese community in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, it was while he was in Boston, Massachusetts, that he learned English and he enrolled into art classes. Now, his mother supported the family by employing herself or finding a work as a seamstress. Seamstress meaning a person who does tailoring jobs. So she was a seamstress and she used to peddle, she used to stitch linen clothes. Now, at the age of 15, Gibran was sent by his mother to Beirut in Lebanon to attend a Maronite school. They were Roman Catholics, but they were in Syria and they were Christians. He returned to Boston in 1902. In that year and one that followed, Gibran's sister Sultana, half-brother Butros, and mother died of tuberculosis and cancer respectively. So he had a sad upbringing because his mother died, his father was arrested, he lost his siblings to tuberculosis. So he had a very sad upbringing. Now, he spent the remaining part of his life with his sister Mariana, and she supported herself as well as Gibran by employing herself as a dressmaker. Now, in 1904, Gibran began publishing articles in Arabic language newspaper, and also he had his first public exhibit of drawing. So he was a famous painter as well. He used to draw, and these paintings were later taken up by a Boston photographer named Fred Holland Day, and Gibran became a model to Fred Holland Day to most of his photographs. So Gibran modeled for Day, who was known for his photographs of boys and young men. Now, at that time, people used to take pictures of people from the Orient and people who come from India, Syria, and Lebanon, and these were portraits. And Gibran was a model of Fred Hollande. Now, it was through Day that Gibran's artwork caught the attention of a woman named Mary Haskell. Now, Mary Haskell ran an old girls' school, and Mary Haskell, later on became the lifelong patron of Khalil Gibran. So she spent her money to make him study art at the Academia Julian in Paris in 1908. So he was sent to a Parisian academy to study arts, to study sculpture and painting by Mary Haskell, a woman who ran an old girls' school. So these are all snippets from his life which are important because Mary Haskell was like a mother figure to him. Now, while he was in Paris again, Gibran met with the sculptor Auguste Rodin. Now, you might be familiar with Auguste Rodin. If you have ever seen the sculpture, The Thinker, you know who Rodin is. Rodin was the person who sculpted the sculpture, The Thinker, as well as The Lovers or The Kissers. So, he had two famous sculptures in his name. One was the two kissing couple, and then the other was The Thinker, and it was Auguste Rodin who sculpted these sculptures. Now, Auguste Rodin, the famous sculptor, called Khalil Gibran the William Blake of 20th century. Now, you may not know the details of who William Blake is. William Blake was a famous pre-romantic. He used to write prophetic poems. He used to write poems which were visionary in nature, mostly relating to the themes which were taken from Christianity. So, William Blake wrote two kinds of poetry. There was Song of Innocence as well as Song of Experience, where Song of Innocence deals with characters like lamb who are innocent. Song of Experience deals with mature experiences of an adult, and it has tiger for a character. See, there is a contrast. Lamb is a symbol of innocence and tiger as a symbol of experience. So this was all about William Blake, and William Blake was considered to be a prophetic writer, and he's a famous figure in English literature. And Auguste Rodin, the famous sculptor, said that Khalil Gibran was the William Blake of 20th century. Now, Gibran had drawn hundreds of drawings and paintings, and his paintings are widely regarded. And moving on, Haskell, again the woman who gave Gibran the money to go to the Julian School in Paris. So Haskell enabled Gibran to move to the New York City in 1911. So he went to America. He settled in the capital city, where he settled in one-room apartments in a bohemian Greenwich village. Now, he led a bohemian lifestyle, which means that somewhat kind of a hippie lifestyle. At a lunch in the village, Gibran met Alfred Knopf, who became his publisher. Now, there is a famous publisher in America, and his name is Alfred Knopf. Even today, they publish books. And the first books to come out in 1918 by Gibran was the collection of poems and parables named The Madman, which was published in the year 1923. Now, Knopf published what would become Gibran's most famous work, The Prophet. Now, The Prophet is a small book. It is like a booklet, but it contains, again, prophetic visions. And it met with several critical plays, and it is one of those bestsellers. And though this book was never reviewed by the New York Times, because most of the bestsellers are reviewed by the New York Times, this book had sold more than 1,200 copies in the first year itself, and still it has got a fan following. So it is a global phenomenon. This book was a global phenomenon. Now, The Prophet has sold more than 10 million copies, and it made Gibran one of the best-selling poets in the world. Now, The Prophet, the poetry collection from which the poem that we are about to study is taken from, was a work which was biblically inspired. It was inspired from Bible, and it became popular in the 1960s, because the swinging 60s was a time period in which people got disillusioned with Christianity, and they wanted something to hold on to, and they thought that Gibran and his work were a way to free themselves from the religious dogma and the religious ideologies towards a universal spiritualism. So in the 1960s, people were looking more or less at a universal spirituality rather than on Christianity. So to find peace from the two world wars and the remnants of two world wars, people looked at the East, in the Eastern countries, in the Middle East, and they found that the essence of spirituality can be seen in Indian mythology and in Buddhism, and even in the teachings of Sufi philosophies. So Sufism. So they turned to all these alternate philosophies, and it was at that time that the Prophet became a global phenomenon. Now, Gibran was active in New York, and he was active in New York-based Arab American literary groups called the Pen League. These members of the Pen League promoted writing in Arabic as well as in English, and throughout his life he had published 9 books in Arabic, 8 in English, and he would ruminate, or he would think about and write about love, longing, death, and he would often explore religious themes as well. Since he was brought up as a Christian in a Syrian community, his thoughts are more or less broad, and his thoughts includes thoughts taken from Christianity, thoughts taken from Sufism, mysticism. All these elements are there, and the major factor that made people read his work as a spiritual masterpiece was that he was non-judgmental in his attitude. He was not a judgmental writer. He was a non-judgmental poet, and that's why people turned towards him from Christianity in the 1960s, in the swinging 60s. He died of liver cirrhosis in the year 1931 in the New York City. Now, that was all about the poet. Now, let's move on with the poem. So, this is a very short poem, and I'll just read it. Now, as I said before, this poem is taken from the poetry collection, The Prophet. And it begins thus, where a woman is asking the Prophet. Now, The Prophet is a series, it is a poetry collection in which a prophet addresses a group of villagers. And at that time, the prophets used to sit near a peepal tree or an important tree in the village, and the people used to sit or gather around him, and they used to ask prophet questions, and the prophet used to give them answers. Okay, prophet is like a spiritual leader. So the people in the village used to ask the prophet questions, and he used to give them answers. And this poem begins as such. A woman with a baby in her arms, in her bosom, come towards the prophet and ask him to speak of children. So he is asking the prophet to speak about children. And there begins our poem. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backwards nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. It's a wonderful poem. Now let's begin with an analysis of the poem. Now this is a moving piece of parenting advice. This is an advice to parents. Your children are not your children. it begins with the declaration that your children are not your children. Now, the woman who came to the prophet asked the prophet to speak of children, and the reply that the prophet gives is absolutely shocking. He says that your children are not your children. Hey, if my children are not my children, then whose are they? So your children are not your children. The answer is not like that. It means that they are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself, which means that though you are bonded to your children by blood, your children are not yours. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of the life longing for itself. So the life itself longs to live. Life longing to live. The creation and the created. The world was created by the Creator, and each and every creation in the world longs to live. And in this way, your children are not your children. They were created in the world with a purpose. They were created in this world to fulfill their aspirations. So their aspirations again can be equated with life's aspiration. Each and every one of us have life in this earth. And that life wants us to do something. We are all supposed to do something with our lives, right? നമ്മളെല്ലാവരും നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ എന്തെങ്കിലുമൊക്കെ അക്കംപ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്യണമെന്നുണ്ട്. സോ അങ്ങനെ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ലൈഫ് ഇറ്റ് സെൽഫ് ആസ് എ ലോങ്ങിങ് ടു ലിവ്. ജീവിതത്തിന് തന്നെ ഒരു അർത്ഥം ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കണം, ജീവിക്കാനായിട്ടൊരു അർത്ഥം ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കണം. ആൻഡ് ഈച്ച് ആൻഡ് എവറി ചൈൽഡ് മസ്റ്റ് ഫൈൻഡ് ദാറ്റ് ഓൺ ഹിസ് ഓൺ. No father or mother can teach the child to fulfill their aspirations. In the end, the child himself or herself should fulfill his or her aspirations. Your children, your father and mother won't be there throughout your life. It is you who have to fulfill your aspiration. It is you who have to move forward. Even though your parents are your parents and you are their children, your aspirations in life are different from, or your path in life is different from their path in life. So you and they are connected only by the bond of blood. That's what the prophet says. They come through you but not from you. They come through you means they are bonded to you through biological means, through genes, through the umbilical cord. These are all biological means that connects us with our parents, but they are not a continuation of us, right? You are not a second part of your father or your mother. In the West, they used to call their children by the name Junior, right? You have Martin Luther King and you have Martin Luther King Jr. So there was a continuity in that sense. That is, the father lived through their sons, or the mother lived through their daughters or sons. That was there. There was a continuity of life. There was a continuity through generations. But he says that they come through you. They come through the umbilical cord. They come through your genes, but they are not from you. They are not an integral part of you. You are not an integral part of them. They are not an integral part of you. But they are not a part of you. You and your father and your mother and the father and mother's relationship with the son or the daughter is not something which is continuous, which goes as part 1 and part 2. You are a separate entity. You are separated from your parents by your thoughts, by the way in which you live. So you are separated from your parents. You are separate entities. Though they come from you, though you are bonded to your parents through biological means, though the parents are bonded to their children through biological means, they are not a part of you. They do not, in the truest sense, come from you. They are not your essence. Your essence is different from your son's or daughter's essence. Your ideas and thoughts are different from your son's and daughter's ideas and thoughts. And though they are with you, and usually in India and the Middle East and mostly in the Eastern countries, there is a system, or there is a custom by which people live with their own parents, with their own families. If you have seen the movie Separation, this theme is dealt with in a very poignant way. In most of the modern day films, this theme is there, where the parents live with their children. Yes, in India, in the eastern parts of the world, the parents parents live with their children, not like the West, not like Americans, where they live a separate life from the age of 18. It's not like that in India or in the Middle East, where the parents live with their children throughout their lives, till their end. So, though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. So he's saying that though your children live with you, though they may be living with you, they are not your possessions. You must not treat them as your valuable possessions. Though they stay with you, which is a common culture in the East, they do not belong to you, which means that you must not treat your children like your prized possessions. They are not something that you own. Your children are not something that you own or something that you possess. That's what Khalil Gibran says. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. You may love your children. You must, give them enough love. But you must not control them with your thoughts, or you must not try to force your thoughts and your ideologies upon them. Okay, some parents do that they want their children to be like them. They try to mold their children. But that should not be the case. Khalil Gibran says that you must not force your ideas and thoughts upon your children. Now, if you have seen the movie Akashamittai, in that movie too, there is this famous theme of parents trying to mold their children. You must not mold your children as if they were a clay. It's your task to love them, but it's not your task to force your ideas upon them, your thoughts upon them. You must not do that, because they are independent entities. For they have their own thoughts. Each and every one of you have your own thoughts, right? So for even children have their own thoughts, they have their own thought processes, they have their own identities. Though they come across their identities, or they meet their identities for the first time in the age of 18 or in the age of 21, still they have their own thought process. They have their own ideas and identities, and you need to address them. That's what Khalil Gibran says. So you are separated from your children by your thoughts, and you must not force your thoughts and ideas upon them. If you believe in a particular political ideology, or if you believe in a particular religion, you must not force your sons and daughters to follow that political ideology or that religion. You must give them the freedom to choose things for themselves. That's what Khalil Gibran is saying. For they have thoughts on their own. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. You may provide shelter to their bodies. Even when you are born, a child takes its form in the mother's womb, right? So the mother gives the child the shelter right from the time in which the child is in her womb. ഗർഭപാത്രത്തിൽ ഇരിക്കുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ ആ കുട്ടിക്ക് ഷെൽട്ടർ കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരാളാണ് അമ്മ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. So you may house their bodies, but not their souls. You may give shelter to their bodies in your womb, in your home. You may give them a place in your home, you may give them a place in your womb, but you must not contain, or you must not try to contain their souls. Now, soul is something which is beyond body, right? Beyond the realm of body. You must not house or chain their souls. You must leave them to lead a life of their own. Their souls must be free. Their souls must not be controlled by you. So if your child is free-spirited, let him be. That's what Khalil Gibran says. You must not try to control their souls. Though you may house their bodies, though you may provide shelter to their bodies, you must not contain their souls. For their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. Because what happens with the children is that their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit. Children are not old souls. Usually people have the saying of old soul. I'm an old soul, some people might say, because in their thoughts, in their ideology, they belong to another generation. Though they may be living with you, though they may be your peers, of your own age, they might say that I am an old soul, which means that I belong to another generation. My thought process is different from you, because I think as if I belong to another generation of your. But he says, Khalil Gibran says that the soul of the children always dwell in tomorrow. That is, you cannot visit tomorrow, right? Your father and mother will be there for you, but they cannot be there for you throughout your life. They won't know where you will be 30, 40, 50 years from now or 60 years from now. They won't know what your whereabouts are. And he says that though you may house their bodies, you must not house their souls, and because their soul dwell in tomorrow. It is said that there is a common saying that today's children are tomorrow's citizens. So children have that ability to grow and they live in the future. Okay, though they are in present staying with you, they would eventually outlive you and they will live in the future, and you cannot visit that future. You cannot be in that tomorrow, right? So you may house their bodies but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. These children live in tomorrow. They are the citizens of tomorrow. നാളെയുടെ പൗരന്മാരാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അവരുടെ സോൾസ്, അവരുടെ ആത്മാവെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നാളെയിലാണ് ഇരിക്കുന്നത്, ഇന്നിലല്ല. For their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. They live in tomorrow. They live looking out for future, and you cannot visit that future. You cannot be in that future. Sometimes your children may outlive you, and then you will not be able to see their future. Not even in your dreams will you be able to see them. So you cannot fathom, you cannot understand the depth of their souls which belong to the future. You may strive to be like them. You may try to be like them. You may try to be like children. Strive means try. So you may try to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. You may try to be like them, but you must not try to make them like you. So this is a very contradictory statement, right? Often parents say that you must learn from your parents or learn from your father, learn from your mother. But here Khalil Gibran says that the parents should learn from their children, and they must be like their children, because children are always in a state of flux. The generation in which your parents lived is different from the generation in which you live in. Now you are the ones who are in a state of flux. You are constantly being bombarded by change. You know the changing fashions, you know the changing political climate, everything. Your parents might not know about that. So Khalil Gibran says that you must learn from your own children. You must try to be like them. You may try to be like them, but you must not try to make them like you. You must not make them like you. You must not mold them to be like you. നിങ്ങളെപ്പോലെ ആവാൻ തിരിക്കാൻ നോക്കുക. അവരെ പോലെ ആകാൻ നിങ്ങൾ ശ്രമിക്കുക. പാരൻസിനോടാണ് പറയുന്നത്. പാരൻസ് കുട്ടികളെ പോലെ ആവാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുക. കുട്ടികളെ പാരൻസിനെ പോലെ ആകാതിരിക്കാൻ നോക്കുക. You must not mold your children in your own image. That's what he is trying to say. You must not try to mold your children in your own image. For life goes not backward. And what is the reason that he says? And why is that so? Because he says that life, whenever life moves on, life moves not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday. Life moves on forwards, right? Life move on forward. എപ്പോഴും മുന്നോട്ടാണ് ലൈഫ് പോകുന്നത്, not backwards. So for life goes not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday. Now life does not linger around in yesterday. ഇന്ന് ഈ നിമിഷം അത് മാത്രമേ നമുക്ക് പ്രസൻറ്റിൽ കിട്ടുന്നുള്ളൂ. ആൻഡ് ദെൻ എവറിത്തിങ് ലൈസ് ഇൻ ദ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ. ആൻഡ് വി ഷുഡ് നോട്ട് ലിവ് ഇൻ അവർ പാസ്റ്റ്, and we should not look backwards. Once a thing is said and done, and if it is in the past, ഒരു കാര്യം നടന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞെങ്കിൽ you should not look at the past and linger about in the past, because if you linger about in the past, then you won't be able to progress in your life. In order to progress, in order to move forward in your life, you need to move away from the past, and you must look forward to the future. For life goes not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday. Now life does not linger around in yesterdays, but it moves forward. Hence you need to learn from your children. മുന്നോട്ടാണ് ലൈഫ് പോകുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ലൈഫിൽ മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുന്ന മറ്റ് ആൾക്കാരെന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആരാണ്? കുട്ടികളാണ്. കുട്ടികൾ മുന്നോട്ടാണ് അവരുടെ ജീവിതം പോകുന്നത്. സോ യു മസ്റ്റ് നോട്ട് ലുക്ക് ബാക്ക്വേർഡ്, ഇൻസ്റ്റെഡ് യു മസ്റ്റ് ലുക്ക് ഫോർവേഡ്. യു മസ്റ്റ് മേക്ക് children as your models. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite. Now this is a wonderful metaphor. Now this is a series of metaphors that he is using here. He says that you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. So നിങ്ങൾ പാരൻസ് ആരാണ്? യു ആർ ദ ബോസ്. യു ആർ ലൈക്ക് ദ ബോ. വെൻ യു ടേക്ക് ദ ബോ ആൻഡ് ദി ആരോ, അമ്പും വില്ലും എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞ് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പാരൻസ് ആർ ലൈക്ക് ബോസ്. വില്ലുകളെ പോലെയാണ് പാരൻസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ദ ചിൽഡ്രൻ ആർ ലൈക്ക് ആരോസ്. ചിൽഡ്രൻ അമ്പുകളെ പോലെയാണ്. ആൻഡ് ദ ക്രിയേറ്റർ ഇസ് ദി ആർച്ചർ. ദ ഗോഡ് ഇസ് ദി ആർച്ചർ. ആർച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആരാ? അമ്പെയ്ത്തുകാരൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ആരാണ്? ദൈവമാണ്. സോ ദി ആർച്ചർ sees the mark upon the path of the infinite. Archer knows where your children are moving. നിങ്ങളുടെ മക്കൾ എവിടെയായിരിക്കും, മക്കളുടെ അവസാനം എവിടെയായിരിക്കും, മക്കൾ ഇനി ജീവിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന ജീവിതം എങ്ങനെയുള്ളതായിരിക്കും, ഇതെല്ലാം ആർക്കാ അറിയാവുന്നത്? ദൈവത്തിനാണ് അറിയാവുന്നത്. സോ ദി ആർച്ചർ സീസ് ദ മാർക്ക് അപ്പോൺ ദ പാത്ത് ഓഫ് ഇൻഫൈനൈറ്റ്. ഹിയർ ദ പാത്ത് ഓഫ് ഇൻഫൈനൈറ്റ് refers to life. Life is like something which is infinite. You cannot predict when your end will be, right? So only God knows where your end will be, and that end is marked by the mark. ഈ നമ്മുടെ ബോ ആൻഡ് ആരോ യൂസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് വെൻ വി എയിം ആൻഡ് വെൻ വി ഹിറ്റ് അറ്റ് ദ ബുൾസ് ഐ, ദെൻ ദ ആർച്ചർ നോസ് വേർ ദ മാർക്ക് ഇസ്, and he knows how to lead the arrow and how to send forth the arrow. അമ്പെയ്യാൻ എങ്ങനെ ദൈവത്തിന് മാത്രമേ അറിയാവൂ. അതായത് ഈ കുട്ടികളെ ഫ്യൂച്ചറിലോട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു വിടാൻ ദൈവത്തിന് മാത്രമേ അറിയാവൂ. അവരുടെ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ എന്താണെന്ന് ദൈവത്തിന് മാത്രമേ അറിയാവൂ. നിങ്ങൾ ആരാണ്? നിങ്ങൾ വില്ലുകളാണ്. സോ യു ഹെൽപ്പ് ദി ആരോസ് ടു റീച്ച് ദെയർ പാത്ത്. ഓക്കെ, and it is God who directs the arrows. You help the arrows to reach their path, to reach their final destination, but it is ultimately the God who gives direction to the arrows. So here he is using a series of metaphors. Khalil Gibran is using a series of metaphors. Here the bows refers to parents. Villu ennu parayna parents aanu. Arrows or അമ്പുകൾ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ചിൽഡ്രൻ ആണ്. ആൻഡ് ആർച്ചർ ഓർ അമ്പെയ്ത്തുകാരൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആരാണ്? നമ്മുടെ ദൈവമാണ്. ആൻഡ് ദ പാത്ത് ഓഫ് ഇൻഫിനിറ്റ് ഇസ് ലൈഫ് ഇറ്റ് സെൽഫ്. ബിക്കോസ് വി ഡോണ്ട് know what will happen to us next, right? We don't know. We are not certain about anything in our life. When COVID hit, nobody was certain about anything that was going to happen in their life. So the path of infinite refers to life itself. Now he uses another powerful imagery. He says that he bends you with his might. So God may bend you, because നിങ്ങൾ പാരൻസ് ആണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ വില്ലുകളെ പോലെയാണ്. ആൻഡ് ഗോഡ് ബെൻഡ്സ് യു വിത്ത് ഹിസ് മൈറ്റ്. ഗോഡ് സകല ശക്തി ഉപയോഗിച്ച് നിങ്ങളെ ബെൻഡ് ചെയ്യും. യു മേ ബി ബെൻഡ് ബട്ട് യു കനോട്ട് ബി ബ്രോക്കൺ, റൈറ്റ്? ബെൻഡിങ് ഹിയർ റെഫേഴ്സ് ടു ഓൾ ദ ട്രയൽസ് ആൻഡ് ട്രിബുലേഷൻസ് ഇൻ ലൈഫ് ദാറ്റ് ദ പാരൻസ് ഫേസ് വൈൽ റേസിംഗ് ദെയർ ചിൽഡ്രൻ. നിങ്ങളുടെ പാരൻസ് അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന കഷ്ടപ്പാടുകളെയാണ് ഇവിടെ ബെൻഡിങ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഒരു കുട്ടിയെ വളർത്തിയെടുത്തുകൊണ്ട് വരുന്നതിൽ പാരൻസ് അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന കഷ്ടപ്പാടുകളെയാണ് ഇവിടെ ബെൻഡിങ് എന്ന ഇമേജ് കൊണ്ട് കവി ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഹി ബെൻഡ്സ് യു വിത്ത് ഹിസ് മൈറ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഹിസ് ആരോസ് മേ ഗോ സ്വിഫ്റ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഫാർ. സോ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് പാരൻസിനെ ഇത്ര ബെൻഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് പാരൻസിൻ്റെ ലൈഫിൽ ഇത്രയധികം ട്രയൽസ് ആൻഡ് ട്രിബുലേഷൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്? സോ ദാറ്റ് ദെയർ ചിൽഡ്രൻ മൈറ്റ് റീച്ച് എ ബെറ്റർ പാത്ത്, സോ ദാറ്റ് the children might move quickly and reach their destination which is afar. ദൂരെയുള്ള ഡെസ്റ്റിനേഷനിൽ വളരെ വേഗത്തിലെത്താൻ കുട്ടികളെ അവർ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലത്ത് വളരെ വേഗത്തിൽ എത്തിക്കാനാണ് ഓരോ പാരൻറ്റും ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്, അല്ലേ? ഈച്ച് ആൻഡ് എവറി പാരൻറ്റ് വിഷസ് ടു ഗെറ്റ് their children on a safe zone. They always want the best to their children. So the parents meet with all the trials and tribulations of life just to give a better future to their children. And he bends you with his might, and his arrows that his arrows may go swift and far. So why is he bending the bow? Why is he bending the parents, or why is the archer or God testing the parents? So that their children would reach their ambition, so that the children would reach their final destination without any obstacles in between. let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. And he says that when you bend, let it be for gladness, let it be for happiness. So when you bend in your archer's hand, let it be for happiness, let it be for future prosperity. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he says that even though the God loves the arrows that fly, even though God loves children dearly, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So here the arrows that flies refers to the daughters and the son, and he says that even though God loves children dearly, he also loves the parents who are stable. He also loves the bow. He also loves the parents, the father and the mother who are stable, who wish to give their children a bright future. So is that clear? So the prophet here strikes a perfect balance by referring to the law of creation, where God loves both the bow as well as the arrow because they complement each other. The parents and their children complement each other in their life's journey, because only when you complement each other, only when you help each other out, or will you be able to live through the infinite journey of life. And Khalil Gibran here is stressing on the importance of children's individuality, of their independence, and that the parents must never try to force their ideologies and their dogmas and principles upon their children. Instead, they must learn a thing or two from their children. That's the theme of this poem. So on that note, we come to an end of this lecture. I hope that it was clear. Thank you.